Hey there, welcome to Mike's Collection episode 252. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is just a bunch of random Marvel stuff. Now, I've got a whole bunch of new toys recently, and I've got a bunch of videos in the pipeline that I'm planning on doing. I've got about 3 different waves of Masters of the Universe Origins figures that I'm trying to get reviewed. I've got some miscellaneous stuff that I need to cover. And a couple of weeks ago, I got a whole new wave of Marvel Legends figures. It was the Puff Adder Build-A-Figure. So, Puff Adder is a member of the Serpent Society. You had to get 6 figures to be able to build him. Plus, there was a 7th figure in the wave in Iron Man. I got him too. So I have that whole wave of figures, and I assumed that would be the next Marvel video that I would be shooting. However, since I got that wave of figures, I've been picking up a lot of little Marvel odds and ends in the meantime, and I think I'm going to get those off my table first. So primarily, it's been these little 3 3/4 inch Marvel figures, which are also called Marvel Legends, which is a little confusing. I think most people refer to them as Marvel Legends Retro because of the kind of retro Kenner style that they're designed in. So I've got a bunch of these figures to talk about, because they've recently gone on sale at the dollar stores here in Canada. So these figures you used to find retailing for $24, even sometimes $29. And now you're finding them for $5 at the dollar store. So while I always bought some of these figures, and they come on really nice blister cards, you can actually see a row of them displayed behind me here. I was very choosy about which characters I bought. It was usually just my favorites, like Spider-Man, Green Goblin, and Venom, and I would normally leave characters like Mr. Fantastic behind. But for $5, they're great figures, so I've been picking up a whole bunch of them. So these are probably the first thing that we're going to talk about, but then I've also picked up a couple of random Marvel Legends. Some of them are brand new. Some of them are some older ones that I got secondhand, but I still want to take a minute to show you them. I also got a new Marvel Select figure. So that's a figure, depending on the character, sometimes you can display them with your Marvel Legends because they're kind of in the same scale if it's a larger character. So like over here in my Marvel Legends display, which I don't think you guys can see too much of it right now, but I have the Marvel Select Abomination and Watcher. Some of these characters are a little bit larger. They still blend in with my Marvel Legends. So I don't buy too many of them, but when there's a cool one and it's one of the larger characters, I usually pick it up. So I've got one of those to talk about as well. So I think that's everything. There's a lot to cover, so I think we're just going to flip things around and we'll dive right into it. So here are all the Marvel Legends retro figures that I've bought in the past month or so. And they're pretty great little figures. I really like these guys. And this here, you can see I've got quite a few of them. It's almost doubled the size of my collection of these guys just in the past month or so. So I'm kind of getting into it a little bit more. And what's kind of a shame is that it's kind of rumored that this line is coming to an end. I don't know if that's been confirmed by Hasbro, but beyond the newest wave of figures, which just came out, there haven't been any announcements for any future waves yet. And the fact that they're showing up at dollar stores doesn't really bode well for the brand. So it's kind of a shame that if this might come to an end just as I'm kind of getting into it, but no matter. Anyway, lots of cool figures here. So why don't I start over on the left with the Thing. Now, I've never been a huge Fantastic Four fan. I like them, but to be fair, I've never read any of the classic Stan Lee, Jack Kirby Fantastic Four comics, which is what made this such a beloved comic book to begin with. I've read it for short stints in the 80s and the 90s. Maybe read it a couple times in the 2000s. But these characters show up a lot in, the guest star in Spider-Man's book, or they show up in all the big events that I usually read, like Civil War or Secret Invasion, things like that. So I feel I get my fair share of Fantastic Four. Anyway, of the 4 members, I've always been kind of lukewarm on 3 of them, but I've always really loved the Thing. Like, how could you not love the Thing? He's just such a cool looking character. This big orange rock guy. And he's just a fun character too. Like, he seems like a nice guy. He's got all these kind of funny catchphrases. Anyway, so I mentioned before that with this line, when it was still, full price, I was being very choosy about which figures I would buy, and I would usually just buy my favorites. The Thing would qualify as one of my favorites. So this is a figure I probably normally would have bought, but I did not. I left him behind, so I am glad that I was able to get him now for only $5. But the reason I left him behind is because these days I collect the 6-inch Marvel Legends figures, and I'm pretty much all in on them. I don't necessarily buy every single figure, but I try to buy every unique character. So, I might not buy every single Iron Man they make and all that sort of stuff. But I have hundreds of different characters of Marvel Legends, and several more in duplicates, like multiple variations of Spider-Man and Iron Man. But before I collected Marvel Legends, I was collecting Hasbro's previous line of 3 and 3-inch Marvel figures, which were called Marvel Universe, and I was all in on those. I have a pretty big collection of those. I don't know how many I have, probably more than 100 or about 100. So that collection was going really good for me, but then they phased it out in favor of the 6-inch figures. So when they went back to the 3 and 3/4-inch format, I was kind of reluctant to get on board. But a lot of those 3 and 3/4-inch figures from the Marvel Universe line left a lot to be desired. They were kind of gangly and kind of weird, but I found with the larger characters, they were actually quite nice. So the reason why I didn't buy this Thing figure right away is because I had multiple versions of the Thing from the 3 and 3/4-inch Marvel Universe line. And you can see these figures here are quite a bit more articulated. They've got that, kind of ab crunch there. They've got elbow joints. They've got wrist joints. They've got knees. They've got ankles. They swivel. Their heads can look side to side. These other guys, they've only got a few points of articulation. Much more limited. They're much more retro in style. So you can see this thing here and that thing there are similar. This guy here is a little larger. But I also have that thing in pants and boots. And I have him again in kind of mid-length shorts. So lots of different Thing figures in this scale. And they're quite nice. Like this one here especially. I really like the paint wash over him so you can see all the detail of his rocks. I really like that head sculpt with the underbite and the big brow there. I thought this was just a really great figure. So that's why I didn't buy this one right away. I just kind of thought, well, I've got some really nice 3 and 3/4-inch things already. But this one has a charm all its own. Even though it's simpler, it lacks all that detail. The sculpt isn't as nice. It's still just, it's fun in that retro, simple style. Plus, this collection is growing for me, and these figures just don't really blend with these guys. So if I ended up getting the other 3 members of the Fantastic Four in this scale, it doesn't quite look right with this Thing. So I am glad that I ultimately was able to get this Thing and to get him for a good price. Anyway, let's move on to Mr. Fantastic. So Mr. Fantastic, he is a very important member of the Marvel Universe. He's one of the super smart guys, him and Tony Stark. Usually when superheroes get in over their heads, like Spider-Man, for example, Spider-Man's pretty good at fighting guys like the Scorpion and Dr. Octopus on his own. But whenever he has to face some sort of cosmic or magical threat, he turns to, either Iron Man, Mr. Fantastic, Doctor Strange, somebody like that with a bigger power set and maybe a bigger brain to help him out with that sort of stuff. So, he's a character you kind of need in your Marvel Universe. And this is a pretty cool figure of him. It's in what I would say is probably the most iconic outfit for the Fantastic Four. The white on the blue. I really like that look. It's simple. The sculpt on him is nice. I think the head looks like Reed Richards to me. The white hair at his temples could have probably been done a little better. It looks a little sloppy. But other than that, I think it's a pretty good figure. And I should mention, I'm not going to talk about the articulation on all these figures. Most of them have 7 points of articulation. You'd think they would only have 5 because they're done in that retro kind of Kenner style like the old Star Wars figures. So their arms move forward and backwards, their legs move forward and backwards, their heads turn around. And that's all the articulation that Kenner figures had. But with these Marvel figures, they usually have an articulated, at the glove there, you can spin their hands around. I don't think the Thing had that articulation, so he legitimately only does have the 5 points of articulation. But most of these other figures will have 7. Anyway, so this is a cool looking read. And I do have a Mr. Fantastic from the Marvel Universe set of figures. And I was never a big fan of this read. Like, it's got a more detailed head sculpt. I was going to say the white hair was done better, but looking at it now, I'm not so sure. It's kind of sloppy as well. And the way it carries around the whole back of his head like that. I don't think that's how it really appears in the comic books. I think it is usually just at his temples. But I don't like this outfit. It's a more contemporary outfit with the short sleeves and kind of that black piping just kind of needlessly throughout the costume. So, and this is one of the skinny figures I was talking about, and they come across really gangly. I just don't think it works as well as it did with the Thing. So again, the scale's a little off. I don't know if it's because these figures are probably about 4 inches rather than 3 3/4 inch. So I think you'll find that all of these guys are a little bit taller. But, when it comes to the Thing, I think the Marvel Universe figure was probably superior, despite the charm of the retro figure. But with these ones here, I actually think the retro figure is the superior figure. Mostly just because it doesn't have these kind of gangly legs, and I like the outfit better. It's just more iconic. Anyway, let's move on to Black Widow. So here is the Black Widow figure. I also got her at the dollar store for $5. Again, great deal for these type of figures. So she's got the same articulation and everything. She spins right there at the, not quite the wrist. You can see the cut is just above the wrist cuff there, so that's kind of a weird placement for that. Anyway, you can see that she comes with an accessory. It's a rather strange one. It's like a grappling hook gun, which isn't really something I associate with Black Widow. I'm sure she uses one from time to time, but it's a very oversized gun. It looks a little ridiculous with her. A lot of these figures don't come with any accessories at all, so I'm not sure why they felt the need to give her this. I think a little pistol would have been more appropriate, but maybe that would have been so small they think people would have lost it. Anyway, I think the gun's rather silly. I guess it's good they gave it to her, but if I were to display these guys, I wouldn't display her with that gun just because it's a little ridiculous. So she looks good. It's kind of a plain look. She's had multiple looks over the years, different hairstyles, but they went with this one. She's got that yellow belt. Now you can see it's just painted on, which is to be expected for this style of figure. But she looks all right. The head sculpt it's okay. It's not great, but anyway, now to compare it, I do have a Black Widow from the Marvel Universe line. So you can see the outfits are a little different, but similar. Like, she also has that kind of belt made up of all those little circles. She also has the cuffs. The real difference here is that it's silver on the Marvel Universe one as opposed to yellow or gold on the retro one. This figure wasn't great either. Again, she's kind of awkward. Like, her proportions, she just looks a little gangly. I don't think the head sculpt is great. It doesn't really look like Black Widow to me. Like, I think this one's hair is maybe a little too bright and red. Looks more like Mary Jane. This one here is a little too dark. And I just don't really love the hair, the way it's styled, the bangs and everything. So, which one's better out of the two of them? I probably like the retro one better. Although I do actually have another Black Widow at this scale. This one was actually based on her MCU look. So you can see how this one here looks a lot like Scarlett Johansson. And I think this is definitely the superior out of all three of them. It's got, again, a very simple, one color outfit, but there's a lot more sculpted detail. The proportions look a lot nicer. The head sculpt is really nice. Even at this scale, I think they captured Scarlett Johansson's look pretty well. So, yeah. I don't know. It's a fun figure. Anyway, let's move on to Thor. So here is Thor in what I would describe as his classic outfit. Now, this is what Thor has worn for a long time. I think this was probably the same outfit that he had in his first appearance back in the 60s. It might have changed slightly over the years, But this is essentially the same costume he wore right through into the 80s. You know, this was his iconic look. Back in the day when superheroes didn't change their costumes all the time, this was a very iconic look for Thor. Now, in the years since, he's bounced around to variations on this. Sometimes he still has the circles, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he's got sleeves, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he has a beard, sometimes he doesn't. Anyway, this is a this is a good choice for just a classic, iconic Thor. This is the kind of Thor that would appear on, you know, t-shirts and lunchboxes. A lot of the other looks are so like fleeting, you know, they might only last a couple of months. So even though I might prefer some of his more contemporary looks, I think this is the most iconic. Now he does come with an accessory as well. He comes with his little hammer, Mjolnir, and that's, you know, pretty effective. It's got the two-tone paint on it, and everything looks good. The paint on this guy looks good. I like the silver helmet. The cape is attached. You can't remove it, at least not easily. But yeah, it's a nice, soft, pliable plastic, so it moves well. Anyway, he's a cool little Thor. Now, I do have a couple Marvel Universe Thors to compare to. This one is probably the closest to matching that outfit, but you can see here it's a little different. He's got the beard on this one here, and he's also got the helmet that comes down over his eyes. So this is a little bit of a different look, and not a look that I really like. Like, I liked bearded Thor, but I liked his kind of new outfit that went with his bearded look. This sort of seems to be a weird, you know, amalgamation of sort of his old costume with his new bearded look and the new helmet, and it doesn't really work for me. Now this here, this is Thor in the costume he wore. I don't know how to really define that era, but Thor was dead for a little while, and he came back when J. Michael Straczynski was writing the comic book, and he wore this outfit for several years. And I think this is probably the coolest look for Thor, because as classic and as iconic as that one is, it's a little too bright and cartoony. This one here with the like chainmail just made it seem a little bit more realistic, a little tougher. I really liked like the way Thor was drawn back then. The artist, why is his name escaping me right now? Anyway, he's an awesome artist, and the way he drew Thor with this kind of flat nose and everything like this really captures the look from the comic books of that time, and it was probably my favorite era of Thor. So I absolutely love this figure. So yeah, you're not going to top this one in my mind, but for a classic retro 80s style Thor, then yeah, this one's a pretty sweet little figure. So next up we've got Falcon. Now he also has an accessory in his little sidekick Red Wing there, which is pretty cool. So that's his red Falcon, I guess, that perches on his arm. It's kind of weird. I can always get it to perch on one arm, but it won't perch on his other one for some reason. But anyway, the bird is a nice sculpt and everything. It looks good. And Falcon looks pretty good too. I was never a huge Falcon fan. Like, I just don't really care for this outfit. It's a little goofy, I think. And I just never read a whole lot of comic books with Falcon in them back in the day. Like, you know, the comic book was called Captain America and Falcon for a while, and that was kind of before my time. Falcon has always been kind of like a, you know, B-list character that shows up every once in a while. You know, in more recent years, he's been given more of his own starring role since taking on the mantle of Captain America and all that sort of stuff. And I probably like that look for him better. But this kind of, like Thor, this is the classic, iconic, most recognizable Falcon costume, but I don't necessarily think it's his best costume. I think it's a little goofy with the big, you know, chest and the big, you know, his open chest dips all the way down to his belt and stuff. It's a little goofy. Anyway, so besides the bird, he's also got his wings on the back, and they're done pretty effectively. You can see they tuck away nicely like that, but you can spread them out like so. And so then he's got a nice little wingspan. Now these things can actually be flipped right around, so that probably looks a little bit better if he's flying like that. But yeah, not bad. Now I do have a Falcon from the Marvel Universe line to compare to, and I thought it was actually a pretty bad figure. So here's that Falcon. A different outfit, like very similar, but it doesn't have that big, you know, dipping chest. So at least he's wearing a full shirt this time. But again, this is one of the skinnier figures, so he's kind of gangly, and it has that weird joint. See how he's got that joint right in his chest? That always looked really weird to me. And his wings are not nearly as effective. Like, they look more impressive, but they just clip into these little holes in his arms, and they fall out very easily. And it's hard to get a good pose with them, because like, you can get a very particular type of pose. Like, if you pose his arms up like this and you plug them in upside down, like, there you go. That looks like a good flying pose. But then you try and move his arms around, and they just poke out really awkwardly. It wasn't a good design. It was the same wing design they used for the Vulture in this line, and yeah, just doesn't look great. So I think this retro style is much better, much more effective Falcon figure. Now we'll take a look at Black Panther. So Black Panther is a cool character, but not a character that I've ever read on a regular basis. I collected a run of Black Panther several years ago when John Romita Jr. was drawing it, but other than that, I've really never read a significant run of Black Panther comic books. However, I always liked him as a guest star when he showed up in other books and in major events. Now this here is, I believe, his kind of like first appearance look, where he had those blue pinstriped gloves and boots, which is kind of a weird choice. For a character named Black Panther, you'd kind of think just full black would make sense, but it really does help break up the design, and I think it looks good, as opposed to my Marvel Universe version, which is solid black, and it's very plain. Now this is kind of a weird choice they went with this figure, because he seems like he would have been a candidate for the scrawny little body that got used for Mr. Fantastic and Falcon and other characters like that. But he's kind of got a big bulky body, which seems a little too muscular for Black Panther. Anyway, so not only is it kind of a weird scale, but it's just kind of boring because it's just so black, and yeah. So out of these two Black Panther figures, I like this one. It's fun, it's simple, but it's got a good design to it. The paintwork is, that's all you need, and I like it. Plus he comes on that great retro card as well, so really cool. Anyway, let's move on to Phoenix. So here is Phoenix. Now, like all the other figures I just showed you, this was a $5 purchase at the Dollarama. And yeah, this is a figure I never would have bought at retail price. I'm just not a huge X-Men guy. That's one of the corners of the Marvel Universe that I tend to steer clear of. And I prefer, Jean Grey as Jean Grey or Marvel Girl. The Phoenix storyline was kind of before my time, and it's just not my favorite look for her. Like here with the all yellowed out eyes, I don't really care for it. I just recently got a Phoenix Marvel Legends figure, which I think looks quite nice. But this one here, comparatively, it's just kind of plain. The hair's a little big. I don't know. It just doesn't super appeal to me. But for $5, sure, why not? It's not a bad figure. You can see here she's got this kind of rubbery sash. Like this is a different type of material. You can kind of squish it. It's very soft, so I think it is. It probably is still plastic, but very, very rubbery. And yeah, I don't have a Phoenix from the Marvel Universe line to compare to. I only have, I think, this one Jean Grey, and this was a weird outfit for Jean. I don't think she ever wore this for very long, but that's what I got. Anyway, it's not a great figure, so yeah, if I was going to only have one of these in my collection, I would probably go with the Phoenix, because this has got to be one of the least long-lasting Jean Grey outfits, and it's just not a great sculpt or anything anyway. So anyway, there you go. Dark Phoenix, not too shabby. Now here is Nova, the human rocket. Now this is a figure, when this was announced, I was really, really tempted to buy it. Nova's not necessarily one of my favorite characters, but I do really like him. And he's the type of character that doesn't get a whole lot of figures. Like with most of these other guys, they've all showed up in the MCU, or, they've had movies, and you can usually find, if not Marvel Legends or Marvel Universe, there's often like child's toys. Like you can go down any aisle in Walmart and find some variation of Thor and Black Widow and maybe Falcon and Black Panther. But somebody like Nova, he's one of these Marvel characters that just doesn't get a whole lot of love, so it's hard to find merchandise of him. So I was really tempted to buy this figure, but I didn't. I always kind of thought I'll maybe grab him later, and then when these figures started going on sale for $5, he was probably at the top of my list that I hope I find him for $5. I didn't. However, I was recently in GameStop, and they had him marked down from his regular price. Like I think they sell them for $18.99, and he was marked down to $9.99. So that was good enough for me. So I grabbed him for about $10, and he's a pretty cool figure. I like that kind of bucket head design of his. His logo looks nice and crisp there. The blue and yellow with the kind of red on the helmet, it all pops. It's a very nice color scheme for a superhero. Now I do have a Marvel Universe version of Nova to compare to, but he's in more of a contemporary outfit. So this is still a decent figure, but kind of gangly, kind of weird. Like these things here, his boot little attachments. Like they looked cool when they were drawn, but the way they made them separate pieces that can be pulled down like this, same as the things on his arms here like this, it's all bendy and kind of weird. Like it all just feels like kind of tacked onto him. So it was effective in the drawing, but not so effective here in action figure form. And the colors, while maybe a little bit more realistic and everything, it just doesn't look as nice as this figure. That figure just looks so much more fun. So, while I do appreciate that they went with this contemporary look, and it's not a bad figure, this is definitely the superior of the Novas, I believe. So I'm definitely glad that I was able to score this guy recently for a good price. Anyway, let's move on to the last one, Dr. Doom. So here is Dr. Doom. Now this figure I actually paid full price for. Now it was still cheaper than a lot of the other ones in that I told you before that they sell from like about $25, sometimes all the way as high as $30. That's what you would pay in like a comic shop probably. But my brother Doug called me from Walmart the other day, and he said that they had the new wave of Marvel Retro, and they had Dr. Doom there, and they had two of them. He was buying one for himself, and he wanted to know if I wanted him to pick up this one for me. So they were $18.99. And considering I had just bought all of these figures for $5, it kind of hurt to pay $20 for one of these figures. But I really did want Dr. Doom from the wave. The other figures in the wave, there was like a Spider-Woman, there's a new Wolverine, there's a new Hulk and Spider-Man, which I think are actually just redos of figures that were previously released. So it wasn't a very exciting wave in general, but Dr. Doom I definitely wanted. And because this is such a recent wave, I don't know that they'll ever show up at the dollar store, and if they do, it could be a long time down the road. So I thought, well, if I want him, I better grab him. So yeah, he's a cool figure. Now, there's something with the face there. I feel he's lacking a little detail. I think the face could be a little bit better. Like maybe they needed to paint his mouth a little bit, like just put some black or some darker gray on there. It's probably asking a lot for them to have painted the rivets on his, on his helmet there. But anyway, he just looks a little flat to me. Like it's not a bad figure, but it's not a great figure. And this is another one of those figures that the Marvel Universe one was so good that by comparison, this guy really doesn't stand a chance. So here is the Dr. Doom from Marvel Universe, and you can see just all that detail in him. Not only has he got all the better articulation and stuff, but look at that tunic there. It's got all that kind of weird cross hatching with the paint wash to bring out the detail. Yeah, the mask on that one, you can see they have colored in his mouth. Now they went with yellow eyes on there, which is a little weird because usually you can see Doom's eyes through his mask. So this is probably more accurate to what you're used to seeing in the comic book. But yeah, this is just an awesome figure. The cape as well. Like this guy's got a little cape, doesn't quite reach the ground. This guy here, he's got a bigger layered cape, much more Spawn-like than Superman-like, let's say. So yeah, a very cool figure. I always loved this one. I actually have it twice. They released it in white as well, which also looks great, even though, Doom did not have this look for very long. But yeah, really, really solid figures. Like them a lot. And so this little guy, he had a lot to live up to, and I don't think he quite gets there. But it's fun for what it is. And yeah, he's still got that wrist articulation right there at the glove. His head turns ever so slightly. It's kind of hindered by the soft rubbery cape. But anyway, that's that. That's Doctor Doom. Before I move on, I just thought I would quickly share my entire collection of Marvel Legends Retro thus far. So you can see it's a pretty small collection as far as my collections go, but it's a fun little collection, and I'm looking forward to growing it if Hasbro continues to make these figures. So anyway, let's move on to some Marvel Legends in the 6-inch scale. So here are some 6-inch Marvel Legends that I recently picked up, but these figures are quite old. So they're just new to me. I picked them up secondhand at Giant Robot Comics, which is one of the local comic shops here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And yeah, they were $14.99 each, which I think is pretty reasonable. Obviously, they're outside their packaging, but I think they have their accessories, for the most part. So yeah, let's talk about them. So this here is Beast from the X-Men. Now, most people probably associate Beast with this look, which is the Marvel Legend that I have in my collection to kind of represent this character. Currently, this figure's from a couple of years ago, and they've done a couple of variations of this hairy Beast. They did this one here. They did one that basically the same as this, but with a lab coat and glasses, because even though he looks like a monster, hence the name, Beast is actually the smartest guy on the X-Men team. And then they also did Beast with his gray fur, which he had for a little while. But before Beast ever had any fur, blue or gray, he looked like this. He was just a guy with big hands and big feet, kind of hairy hobbit-like feet. And, his mutant powers was just being kind of acrobatic and leaping around. I don't know how to describe it exactly. Maybe good balance, superhuman feats, I guess. He could leap around and all that sort of stuff. And that was my introduction to Beast. Now, not that I've been reading comic books since the 60s when the X-Men were introduced and this is how he looked, but he had gone to blue and then back to human and then back to blue, and he's gone through other mutations since then where he turned into like a cat at one point, essentially. But when I started reading comic books, the original 5 X-Men, being Beast, Cyclops, Jean, Iceman, and Angel, they were kind of out of the picture for a little while. And they were just coming back as a new team called X Factor. So X Factor was just being launched right around the time I was starting to read comic books, and Beast was in his human form then. So usually when that's my first introduction to a character in the comic books, that's kind of that's my preferred look for those characters. Like Iron Man, I always liked his Silver Centurion armor because that's what he was wearing in the 80s when I was introduced to him. Things of that nature. So Beast, I know the blue Beastly version makes for a better toy. It's more interesting looking, but I have always wanted a human version of Beast. Now, mind you, if I was to get a version of Human Beast, I would prefer him in his X Factor costume, but this one's still pretty cool. And this was included as part of a box set that had the 5 original X-Men in their original X-Men outfits. And yeah, I wasn't buying Marvel Legends when that was released. I'm not sure what year it came out exactly, but I passed on it. And to be honest, I bet a lot of the figures in that set probably don't hold up so well now, because I really wasn't impressed with Marvel Legends, years ago. The early ones, they sometimes were a little too, I know I've kind of been overusing this word in this video, but gangly. They were just a little weird, which I'm going to talk about in a second when I talk about Steve Rogers. But this Beast, I actually think, holds up very well. Like, this looks like a figure that could come out now in the modern line. Like, I think he looks great. I love that they've given him those hairy arms and hairy feet, but it's very subtle. It's not overdone. It's a nice sculpt. The articulation is sufficient and not overdone, which is part of the problem with those early Marvel Legends. I think they were overly articulated, which added to the gangliness. But this guy here feels nice and thick, and yeah, it's cool to get this version of Beast. And to be honest, like the other characters in the set, like I really didn't need another Cyclops. I've got multiple Cyclopses in my collection. I've got Jean Grey. I've got Iceman. Although I would like a human version of Angel, because the only Angel in my collection is the Archangel version with the blue skin. So I do hope that we get a classic Angel in his human form at some point. If they give us in this matching costume, that wouldn't be my first choice. I'd rather see him in his like red X Factor costume, or even his light blue costume with the little halo on the front. But anyway, this beast is pretty cool, and I was glad that I was able to nab him for only $15. Next up, we've got Agent Steve Rogers. So in the comic books, Captain America died, and that is when Bucky Barnes took on the mantle of Captain America. But before Bucky gave it up, Steve Rogers actually came back from the dead, and he saw that Bucky was doing such a good job as Captain America, he didn't want to take the name and the costume back again. So he decided to fight crime as Agent Steve Rogers, and this is what he wore for a short time. He had a 4-issue miniseries, plus he became a supporting character in Bucky's Captain America book, and I'm sure he was popping up in a few other things at the time. But before long, he returned to being the rightful Captain America, and this costume was retired. Now, I do actually have a figure in this costume from the 4-inch line. So this is the Marvel Universe version of Agent Steve Rogers. And I always really liked this figure. I like this look. Like, obviously, it's not better than Captain America. If I could only have one Steve Rogers figure in my collection, obviously I would pick Captain America. But this is one of those little wild costumes that I'm glad it got kind of immortalized in plastic. And I think he looks really cool in this. So I had this figure. I was happy with it. But then Hasbro canceled the 4-inch line and moved on to the 6-inch line. And this is one of those figures that I would have liked to get again. Now, I do know that I knew that they made this figure. This guy came out in 2012. Now, I didn't really start collecting Marvel Legends until 2014. And I think in 2014, Hasbro really stepped up the quality of their figures. They actually had been doing Marvel Legends for a number of years, but after 2008, they retired it for 4 years, and that's when they were focusing on the 4-inch line. But after a 4-year break, they decided to switch back to the 6-inch line. They tried to do both for a while, and eventually they phased out the 4-inch line. But the figures that came out in 2012 were better than what had come before, but they were still working out some of the kinks, and I think by 2014 they had really kind of perfected it. So this figure here is pretty good, and I think I can display him with my modern Marvel Legends, but he just does have a little bit of that gangliness. Like you kind of see it here in his hips where they don't quite seem to connect in a natural way. There's just something a little off about him. But it is still a cool look. You can see he's got a shield that can be strapped around his... I don't know how that plugs in actually. I think that's just plugged into his back. Yeah, so it's not actually attached to the straps, but it kind of appears that way. But yeah, so he can either hold the shield or you can plug it into his back. I think he was supposed to come with a couple of pistols, which I don't have. But yeah, it's a cool figure. I'm glad I got him. And it's an old figure, like he's like 10 years old. So he's the kind of thing that he's not probably super easy to track down. So I just kind of lucked into the fact that he was available, at Giant Robot. And lastly, I picked up this Iron Man, also $14.99. It's a cool looking Iron Man. I'm not sure what it's from. It's probably from either Avengers, Infinity War, or Endgame. I'm not entirely sure. But if you've watched my videos in the past, you know that I have a whole bunch of Marvel Legend Iron Man. I have his classic gold armor. I have the Silver Centurion armor. I have the Extremis armor. I have the Hulkbuster armor. I have his stealth armor. And besides that, I've got like War Machine in his armor and the Guardsman in his armor. Like, I've got so many different Iron Man and different characters that look like Iron Man. But I actually didn't have any MCU versions of Iron Man. All my Iron Mans are based on his looks from the comic books. Now, I am a comic book guy. I like the MCU Marvel movies, but I typically don't really buy the figures from the MCU movies unless I feel like I need to, because you can't get those characters in their comic book version. For example, the Guardians of the Galaxy, a lot of them aren't available in their comic book versions, so I buy the MCU versions kind of as placeholders. With Iron Man, I've got so many comic versions, you'd kind of think I'd never need to buy an MCU version. But the reason why I don't typically like MCU versions is because they look like actors. It's hard to separate Star-Lord from the actor Chris Pratt that plays him. I look at the figure and I see Chris Pratt. Same as when I look at the Black Widow, I see Scarlett Johansson. But with Iron Man, he's got a full helmet, so he doesn't look like Robert Downey Jr. And I think the Iron Man look from the movies is awesome. Like, I like how they took the armor from the comic books, which never really made sense. Because if you see Iron Man in the comic books, usually his arm is just one big gold metal sleeve. And, like, there's no joints or seams in it. So how does he bend his elbows? It never really made sense. But it was comic books, so you didn't really question it. But I loved how the movie took, what we knew Iron Man was supposed to look like in the comic books, but they made it seem functional, and yet they didn't overdo it. Like when I look at the Transformer movies, they kind of had to do the same thing, but I think they way overdid it, and now you look at a Transformer, you can't even tell what you're looking at. With Iron Man, I think they just nailed the perfect balance, and so yeah, as my Iron Man collection has grown, I just got another one very recently. I'll just grab them for a sec. So I just got another comic book Iron Man, which I'm going to talk about probably in another video or two. But I now have so many comic book Iron Mans that I was thinking, I probably should have at least one MCU version because it is such a cool look and it is different from all the looks in the comic books. So anyway, I grabbed this one. I'm not sure exactly which version it is, but he looks great. He moves great. He's still got the double jointed elbows, double jointed knees, all that stuff. He's got just a little bit of gray kind of mixed into the gold and red to kind of break up the sculpt. Looks really cool. Now, if I had to guess, you can see here that one of his hands has a little hole in it. He probably was supposed to come with a repulsor ray. He probably had a whole set of either interchangeable fists and open hands. I don't have any of his accessories. He might have had blasters for his feet. A lot of Iron Men do. But, yeah, this is all I really need for this guy. I've got so many extra blasters and extra hands and stuff in my spare parts bin. I don't mind that I didn't get the accessories. I'm glad that he at least has one fist and one open hand here. But yeah, it's a really cool figure. Anyway, let's move on. Now this here is another Marvel Legend figure. I just picked him up a couple of days ago. This thing came out last year. And he was, I guess, what they called the deluxe figure. I don't really know why. I don't really think the accessories that he comes with justify calling him a deluxe figure. We still have Toys R Us stores here in Canada. And I think Toys R Us is overpriced on pretty much everything they're selling these days. They sell a lot of new Marvel Legends figures, just like a basic figure, at like $45, which is crazy. Just like a year and a half ago, they were $30, and now they're $45. Anyway, so that's the price of a regular figure. This figure here was $65, I think, and there was no way I was paying $65 for this figure. It's well made, it looks good, and all that sort of stuff, but yeah, it definitely wasn't worth $65 to me. However, I got an email from Toys R Us the other day that said they had a bunch of stuff on sale, and this guy was $35. So technically he was cheaper than what I have to pay for a standard figure these days. And I thought $35 was totally reasonable. So I went down there and I grabbed this guy. And I'm glad I did because I think he's a pretty cool figure. So this looks like Thor, but it is not actually Thor. This is the clone of Thor, which is named Ragnarok. A lot of people called him Clor for a while before they knew what his name actually was for clone Thor. And as you can see here, he's wearing that kind of basic, that classic Thor outfit from the 80s, which we talked about earlier with this little guy. Now, I actually don't have a Marvel Legend in this style of Thor. My other 6-inch Thors all have either more contemporary looking outfits and stuff. So they did make a classic Thor that looked just like this, I think maybe 2 years ago as part of Marvel Legends' 80th anniversary line. So it was the same figure, except he had a normal Thor head with like white eyes where you could see his pupils and all that sort of stuff. He probably didn't look so angry. I didn't buy that figure. I might have bought it if I ever saw it anywhere, but I never saw it. And again, I've talked before how this classic Thor look isn't necessarily my favorite look, even if it is his most iconic. So I never really made much effort to seek it out on the secondary market or anything. So I was fine not getting that 80th anniversary Thor. But then they repackaged it sometime later as the clone of Thor. Now, I don't know what they changed. Like, I know his head is obviously different. So this one here, you can see he's got that kind of Terminator look where half of his face is blasted off. And he's got that metal robot face underneath. And you can see he also has a robot hand here. So those parts are obviously different. However, he does have an additional hand, so you can replace that hand with a human hand if you like. He also has a second head. This is probably the head that came on the 80th anniversary Thor, except rather than red eyes, like I said, he probably had all white eyes or eyes with pupils in them. Because when this character of Ragnarok first showed up, it was during the Civil War storyline. Thor was dead at the time, and we hadn't seen him in the comic books for a while. And then Thor showed up, and he killed one of the other superheroes, and everybody was shocked that Thor would do that. And we only learned later that he was actually like an evil robot clone of Thor, and then the real Thor came back later and kicked his ass. Anyway, so besides the head and the hand, he also has a standard Thor, like Mjolnir hammer here. You can see it's got the little carving there, which is very cool. But even cooler is I love this accessory that you can see him holding here, which is this spinning hammer. So it looks like he's swinging it and he's about to, he uses his hammer to kind of fly. And on every one of those hammers, they've got that little carving, which is really cool. A lot of effort went into that. And it's just a really neat looking accessory. So I'm definitely going to pose him like that. But if you don't want to make it look like he's in action in your shelf, you can always just give him the standard hammer. Anyway, so this guy's pretty cool, especially because I didn't have the other Thor. I could probably choose to, give him this head and give him the human hand. And then in my mind, I could kind of say, yeah, this is Thor. I don't think Thor usually has red eyes, but like whatever. However, I do have other Thors in my collection already. I don't have a version of Clone Thor / Ragnarok. So why not add him to my collection just as is with the robot face and the robot hand. I think it looks really good. It's a really nice base figure, that they used for that 80th anniversary Thor. And yeah, even though this character was short-lived in the comic books, it was an impactful storyline. When he showed up and used his lightning to blast a hole through Goliath and everything, that was pretty shocking. So yeah, it's kind of cool to have him in figure form. And I'm glad that he went on sale, so I was able to add him to my collection. So when I went to Toys R Us the other day, specifically to go buy that clone of Thor figure, I was not expecting to find this Yondu figure there. So this was a very pleasant surprise, because I love the character of Yondu. So I was super stoked to find this figure. And I was even more stoked to find that he was only $35. Which, is still, it's still kind of a high price for these figures. When they were $30, I was totally comfortable with that price. But Toys R Us, like I said, now they sell their figures for $45, which is crazy. And this guy here is a Toys R Us exclusive here in Canada. I'm not sure. I think it's maybe a Walgreens exclusive in the States. I don't know. But when I saw him at Toys R Us, I was like, I can't get him anywhere else. It's not like I'm going to find him at Walmart or the comic shop. So I'm going to have to pay whatever they're asking, because I wasn't about to leave this guy behind. And I was pleasantly surprised that he was only priced at $35. So maybe Toys R Us is learning their lesson and putting reasonable prices on their toys. Or maybe that was a mistake. I don't know. Anyway, super glad to add him to my collection. I do have a Yondu figure that looks like this from the Marvel Universe line, the 4-inch scale. So I've had this guy for a number of years. I always really liked this figure, and I've wanted to get this guy in the 6-inch format for years. And it seemed like not such a long shot because of the success of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. They keep making MCU versions of the Guardians of the Galaxy that I kept hoping that what they would do is what they do with a lot of these waves. They make like 4 MCU characters and then they give us 2 comic book characters in there as well. So I was kind of hoping they would do that with Guardians. Like say, okay, here's 4 movie characters and then 2 classic comic book characters, and then maybe another 4 movie characters and another 2 classic characters. But they have not done that. And this is the 3rd Guardians of the Galaxy movie, supposedly the last one. So I think we're missing out on opportunities for them to give us classic comic book inspired Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm glad we got Yondu, but I still need quite a few more to complete my classic comic book team. So yeah, if you only know Yondu from the movies, you don't really know Yondu because I actually really like Michael Rooker's portrayal. I think that character it serves a purpose in the movies, And the fact that he's kind of a grim and gritty pirate, it works. And I like that guy. I have a figure of Michael Rooker's MCU version of Yondu, but I always wanted a comic book one in there to replace it. In the comic books recently, they actually kind of established the Michael Rooker version as a separate character, so they can coexist. But anyway, I first discovered the Guardians of the Galaxy in the 90s when they got their own comic book title, essentially for the first time ever. These characters, I believe, first appeared in the 60s in like a 2-part story, and then they showed up for a couple of guest appearances, and then they took the starring role of a comic book called like Marvel Comics Presents or something for a while, but that only lasted about 18 issues or so. Anyway, it wasn't until the 90s when Jim Valentino revived these guys that I was introduced to them, and I fell in love with the whole team. So it was Yondu and Vance Astro and Charlie 27 and Nikki and Starhawk and Alita, and we don't have any of those other characters. We have Vance Astro. They gave us him years ago. But then that's it. We don't have any of the other comic book Guardians. Now, most of them haven't really appeared in the movies, so that kind of makes sense, I guess. But Yondu has appeared in the movies, so I kind of thought they would give us a comic book version of him a long time ago. They didn't. But anyway, they finally have. And he looks great. You can see that big giant fin. That was actually detached in the package. You have to attach that to his head yourself. But he's got a lot of personality in the face. Costume looks great. The colors look great. You can see he comes with a loose arrow. He's also got a quiver that plugs into his back. And he's got a bow with this kind of elasticy string, so you can actually pull that back. And yeah, he looks great. So in the comic books, Yondu was much more... He was portrayed more like a Native American. He was much more of like a noble character than the kind of scumbag from the movies. And that's why I was a little disappointed initially with how they portrayed him in the movies, because I was like, that's not my Yondu. And now this is my Yondu. Now, if I have one small little complaint, technically, this isn't my Yondu. This is even earlier. This is the 60s Yondu, as was this one, with that one arm, like one sleeve, I guess. In the 90s, Yondu didn't wear that. Instead, he just had kind of 2 big shoulder pads, but both arms were exposed, like he had bare arms. So I like this look, but this is not the look that he had in the comic books when I was reading him for 60 plus issues, several years back in the day. Anyway, cool figure. I was very stoked to get him. I didn't expect to see him at Toys R Us that day, so that was a total surprise. And yeah, he's awesome. This guy is definitely going to be a contender for my best of the year list at the end of the year, because I love him. Very cool. Here's another Marvel Legend figure that I recently acquired. He's not exactly new. He's, I don't know, maybe a year old at this point. He was part of an X-Men wave of figures. I told you before, I'm not super keen on the X-Men, so sometimes I feel comfortable skipping on waves of X-Men figures. So with this particular wave, I was able to skip it for the most part. I think the only figure I bought from the wave was Siren. This guy here I passed on because he's kind of lame. His name is Vulcan. He is the brother of Cyclops and Havoc, except I think he was born in outer space, and I don't even know exactly what his deal is. His his costume is like super bland, so generic. There's nothing about this guy that excites me. I've read a few comic books with him. I think he was kind of the main protagonist in the War of the Kings event a couple of years ago, but I forgot all about him basically right after I read it. There's just nothing about this guy that really interests me. So he was an easy skip when they first released him, and he was like $35. Anyway, I found him the other day for $19.99, and I thought, what the hell? At least he's a unique character. I don't have a Vulcan in my collection in any scale or format. I don't even know if they've ever released him before in any scale or format. And also, he comes with one of the Build-A-Figure pieces to build the Reaver character Bonebreaker. And I really would like to complete my Bonebreaker someday. It's just I really didn't want to buy a bunch of crappy figures to get him. So at least now, between Siren and Vulcan, I have 2 pieces of Bonebreaker. Maybe I can find some of the other pieces loose someday. Or if anybody watching this has some spare Bonebreaker pieces that they'd like to hook me up with, by all means, let me know and I'll send you my address. Anyway, this guy, I don't really have much to say about him. He's boring. Now this here is Fang. He is another X-Men character. He's not an X-Men, but he's from the X-Men books. He is... I'm not that familiar with him, but he's an outer space guy. He is like a space werewolf. He is part of the Imperial Guard of the Shi'ar Empire. So, and my understanding is that multiple people have taken on the mantle of Fang. So it hasn't been one character throughout all of his appearances. He's maybe died and another Fang has taken his place. Anyway, I know very, very little about him. I don't know if I've read a comic book with him in it. Maybe one or two over my 40 years of reading comic books. I'm mostly just familiar with him, I think, from like the Marvel Universe, like the official handbook of the Marvel Universe guidebooks were like these encyclopedias that described all these characters and stuff. So I know him from those. But anyway, I decided to pick him up. He was the only figure from the wave. So sort of like with Siren in the last X-Men wave. She was the only character I felt like I needed. When this series was announced, I felt like I could skip all of them. Because Fang wasn't even a must-have for me. But when I saw him in the store, I was like, man, this guy is kind of cool. Like, he's a werewolf. He's basically wearing, like, Sabretooth or Wolverine's costume. And, yeah, he looks pretty great. So, I picked him up. By the way, I'm sorry if you can hear my wife unloading the dishwasher upstairs. She usually tries to avoid making noise when I'm doing these videos, but, the dishes got to be done. What are you going to do? Anyway, so yeah, this guy, I thought he looked great, so I decided to pick him up. Plus, he, like Bonebreaker, he comes with a Build-A-Figure piece. I really would like the Build-A-Figure from this wave, but again, I don't want to buy a bunch of crappy figures in order to get it. But Fang came with the head of the Build-A-Figure, which is this guy here. He's another member of the Imperial Guard. This is... I want to say Chode or Chod. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. But you can see he's got an articulated little jaw there. He looks pretty cool. He's kind of like a sea creature type of monster. Anyway, I don't know if I'll ever buy any of the other figures from this wave. So I will likely never be able to complete this guy as a figure. However, his head fits on this abomination torso and arm that I had kicking around. I have lots of pieces from half-finished Build-A-Figures in my collection. So I figure if I can find the other parts to this abomination, I can complete my Chod figure, even if his head doesn't really match. That doesn't bother me a ton. Or maybe I can buy, maybe I'll find two pieces from Abomination, and I'll have to buy another figure to get another Chod piece, so he might have a bright green arm and two dark legs, or one bright green leg and one dark leg. I don't know. Or maybe I'll never finish him. But the head is the most important part. So that's another reason why I decided to buy Fang. And besides the head, he also came with this little dude, which is always on Chod's shoulder. So yeah, that's kind of cute. Now, as I was talking about Chod and his little creature that sits on his shoulder, I remembered that I actually have a Chod figure from the 90s X-Men line that I thought I would go grab for a comparison. So you can see kind of, the look is, retained. This is kind of what he looks like. The new one, I think the head sculpt's obviously a lot better. But this guy here actually came with a little guy too, and that peg on his shoulder is so you can put him on there. Kind of awkwardly. There you go. But yeah, you can see this one here didn't have any paint on his face, but he still has that weird kind of owl face with the bushy tail and the long nose. So, yeah, this is a much nicer looking version of that thing, which I forget its name right now. And this thing even has an articulated head, so you can kind of move him around. You can kind of look in different directions. So anyway, that's pretty cool. So yeah, if you have any extra Abomination or Chod pieces that you want to hook me up with, by all means. And while I was in my bin digging for this guy, I realized I also have a 90s X-Men version of Bonebreaker. So since I was talking about Bonebreaker earlier, I thought I'd bring this guy out. This is what I'm trying to build in the Marvel Legends, but I've got a long way to go because these are the only two pieces I have now. This is the half of the tank that came with Siren, and now I've got this kind of torso part that came with Vulcan, but I still need the other half of the tank, the head, and a couple other attachments and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, if anybody out there watching has that stuff, please let me know. That would save me some time and effort and money. So this here is the last figure that I'm going to talk about today. This is Beta Ray Bill, and this is from the Marvel Select line. So this is not a Hasbro figure, but this guy is really cool. When I first saw this figure advertised, I was like, damn, that's a cool figure. I'd kind of like to add him to my collection. However, I don't really know if he would fit in, because as I mentioned in my introduction, Marvel Select figures are at a larger scale than Marvel Legends. So if you don't care about that sort of stuff, if you just want a cool representation of your character, then by all means go ahead and grab one. But I kind of like to think of my toys as being in a shared universe. I want everything to kind of match up. And so when you get a figure that's just oddly sized, it just doesn't really work for me. But this figure was for sale at my local comic shop, Strange Adventures, for half price because the box was dinged up. So I got him for $20, which I thought was a pretty great deal, and I couldn't really pass him up at $20. So I picked him up. And while he's a little oversized, this look here is a very new look for Beta Ray Bill, where he's got this big feathery headpiece on. He's never had that before, as far as I know. But he had a recent mini-series that I think was like a 4-issue mini-series last year, and this was the look that he had in that comic book. And it seemed to me that they had kind of made the character a lot bigger in that series. The artwork was a little cartoony and kind of exaggerated. So if they are beefing up Beta Ray Bill and they want to make him seem like a larger character now, then maybe he would kind of work with my Marvel Legends. Regardless whether he works or not, it's just a really nice looking figure. And, you know, for $20 I had to buy him. Anyway, he is really cool. He's very big, so he's kind of hard to fit on my screen here because my desk is only so big. But you can see these detail in his boots and just throughout the whole sculpt. He's got that great head sculpt where he's kind of yelling. Big shoulder pads. The cape has got like lots of nice folds and everything in it. It is not a soft plastic, so like it has some bend to it, but very minimal. Like it's pretty hard. And then, like the clone Thor figure I showed you earlier, he's got a very similar accessory where he's got that spinning hammer. So you can actually spin that around, and it looks really, really cool. Now, he did come with an extra hammer, which is called Stormbreaker, by the way, his hammer. So you can give him a standard hammer if you want, or you can give him the swinging hammer. I like the look of the swinging hammer better, but it just might take up a little too much space on my shelf. I don't know how I'm going to display him, but I really do like that accessory, and really every Thor figure should be given something like that. I've also seen Michelangelo figures with nunchuck accessories like that. It's great. Whoever came up with that, brilliant stuff. Anyway, I think I'm going to have to take this out of his hand for a second so I can handle him a little bit easier. So yeah, he's a big figure. He's kind of tough. I'm trying to bend that elbow, and that doesn't want to bend. He is kind of tough to pose. He's kind of stiff. He's, the cape being rigid like it is, it doesn't feel like you can do a whole lot with this guy. The head movement is pretty minimal because of this big giant. You can see how far that comes down his back, and it's got this curve to it. So it doesn't allow you to turn his head a whole lot. You can't look up and down very much. So he's definitely got some flaws, but he's just such a cool character. I've always liked Beta Ray Bill. And I have a Beta Ray Bill figure from the Marvel Universe line, the 4-inch line. And I always thought this was such a really cool figure. Like, basically Beta Ray Bill is an alien horse-looking thing that has Thor's powers. And, he had the classic costume of Thor. So you can see how similar his costume is to that of the classic Thor. Looks really good. And, I love the head sculpt on this guy. That looks so great. Looks just like it did in the comic books. Anyway, so I think this is one of the better 4-inch figures. And when I started to get into the 6-inch Marvel Legends, I really wanted them to make a Beta Ray Bill figure as good as this one. Now, unfortunately, they did make a Beta Ray Bill figure not long after I started collecting Marvel Legends, but this is him. And while he's not a bad figure, he's in a more contemporary outfit, which is much more boring. Like, you can see how instead of having all the shoulder pads and all the circles on the front and all the different colors and the gloves and everything, he just has this kind of plain blue chest plate and then all black below that. It's a very boring look for him. He does have an articulated jaw, which is nice. But so this is a cool Beta Ray Bill figure, but I wanted the classic outfit. This one here is obviously not the classic outfit. It is an even more contemporary outfit. I don't know how long it'll last. I can imagine Beta Ray Bill will probably revert back to this look before too long, or maybe something new entirely. Who knows? But you can see how large he is, because Hasbro felt Beta Ray Bill only needed to be this big, which is, compared to kind of a standard Marvel Legend, he's to scale with those guys, not really that much taller than a standard figure, whereas this guy here looks like he's huge. So he's the kind of character you can get away with it because at least he's an alien. Like if this was Captain America or something, that definitely wouldn't look right because then he'd have to be like an 8-foot tall man and it'd be weird. But since Beta Ray Bill is an alien and he can change his appearance when he powers up, I could see this being like a super powered up version of Beta Ray Bill. And so it doesn't seem inconceivable that I would display him with my 6-inch figures. Anyway, it looks really nice. The hammer is great. But yeah, very limited movement. Very rigid. Really tough joints. Yeah, he's a heavy thing too. He's got some weight to him. Anyway, pretty cool. So that was my review of my latest Marvel figures. Some of the Marvel Retro, Marvel Legends, Marvel Select. So yeah, a little bit of everything. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave comments below. It's always nice to hear from you guys. I'll be back soon with another video because, as I said earlier, I've got all kinds of stuff that still needs to be reviewed before I can put it away. So hopefully, yeah, you'll see me soon with another video. Until then, ciao.